My name is Michael Rubino.
I'm on a personal mission to make sure you don't get sick inside your own home.
I knew there was something wrong. I'm just so relieved there's something that you can do about it.
Hello, thank you for joining us for another episode of Never Been Sicker. I am your host, Michael Rubino, and today's very special guest is Tammy Dean. Tammy Dean, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to be here with us today.
I am beyond excited, and anytime I can come back on and regroup and reconnect with you and just share about, our passion for wellness and everything that goes into that, I'm grateful for the opportunity. So thank you.
Absolutely. So, we might be listening and we might have seen us talking together before because we have, but please, for those that might be just tuning in for the first time, will you give a brief synopsis of the story that kind of led you down this path where we connected?
Yes. So I want to say, So 4 years ago, yesterday, I celebrated the 4-year anniversary of explanting my breast implants. And the reason I explanted was because I was suffering from breast implant illness. And part of those symptoms included mold toxicity. And we connected, and I was a guest on your podcast, I think 2 years ago. And I was just coming off of the first detox protocol that I was on for mycotoxins and black mold and heavy metals and all the things. And we talked about it. Then we talked about, we brought awareness to breast implant illness as it were then. And now it's even more, there's even more awareness around it. And we talked about my journey, the symptoms that I was going through prior to knowing that the breast implants were causing me to be very sick, AKA breast implant illness. And some of those symptoms were brain fog, joint pain, autoimmune markers, markers for RA, skin issues, rash, sweating. My eyes were burning all the time. I couldn't sleep at night. I was just, so sick, and I couldn't figure out why. And I felt like I had this constant sinus issue going on. And, after meeting with my naturopath and hearing somebody talk about breast implant illness, the aha moment surfaced where, oh my gosh, it's my implants. Fast forward, it was my implants, did the explant. There was black mold in one of them. Every doctor told me it was all in my head. Every time I'd go and say, hey, there's something wrong with me. Traditional medicine said, no, it's all in your head, turned me away. But we know our bodies. And, we shared all about my journey then. And now I'm 4 years past and I'm the healthiest I've ever been. But we still continue to be vigilant about our health, especially when it comes to mold exposure.
So speaking of that, you and I talked a little bit offline earlier, and you had a recent run-in with some mold, haven't you?
I want to say, the short answer is yes. And I by trade, I'm a real estate agent. So you can imagine I'm in houses, all day, every day at any given time. Could be at the beach, it could be in the mountains, it could be in the desert, wherever it is. I feel like I have a radar and a detector built into my body for mold. Musty, yes, everybody can smell musty. Everybody can see what's perceived as mold, but we're not mold specialists, so I can't say that's mold. But what I can say is it's a biological symptom, substance that resembles mold. So I was in a house recently for 5 days straight for 4 hours a day, and there was black mold everywhere. There were exposed walls. There was a gutted bathroom, and I saw black mold on the wall, what perceived as black mold, but we soon found out that it was black mold. So the first day that I was exposed to it, I remember saying to myself, oh boy, this is going to go one of two ways, but my immune system's strong enough, I'm going to be fine. Lo and behold, I started feeling like I was having an allergy attack. And then one thing led to another. Then my skin broke out in this rash, and I was confused. I went to the doctor. They said, oh, it's dermatitis. It's this. Here's an antibiotic. Here's a steroid shot. No, I don't want any of that. And what it was the exposure to the black mold triggered a dormant virus that we all have in our body, right? HSV, HPV, whatever it is. It triggered a viral response in my body because of the exposure to the black mold. And I'm not talking about a small patch of black mold. I'm talking about a wall covered in black mold, smelling that on my clothing, in my hair, all of the things. So it triggered this viral response, which then resulted in a widespread rash that you cannot treat. It has to run its course. So imagine feeling like you have the flu all the time, but it's partnered with a rash that you can't treat. Doctors said it was dermatitis. Doctors said it was, this. They didn't know what it was. I did some research, self-diagnosed, and found out it was a condition called pityriasis rosea, which 1% of the population gets this, and it's self-limiting. So it had to run its course. They wanted to pump me full of medication and all of these things, and I said no. I treated it holistically. And what should have been a 12-week run was actually shortened by 6 weeks. So I healed of it completely, ironically enough, on Good Friday. So there you go.
Wow. That's incredible.
It's
Were
incredible.
the doctors surprised that you healed so fast?
Actually, they were. That's a good question, because I just recently went back to the doctor and I did a follow-up. And remember, they had prescribed to me antibiotics, of which when they prescribed this to me, I said, so what infection are you treating? Right? Didn't have an answer for me. They said, just take the doxycycline. It'll clear everything up. And if you'd like a steroid shot, here's a steroid shot for the inflammation. I said, no, I'm going to treat this myself. And they looked at me like I was crazy. So I went to see the doctor for my follow-up a few days ago, and they noticed my skin was completely clear. When I say I was covered, Michael, my arms, my armpits, the groin, my legs, everywhere was covered in a Christmas tree rash. If you look it up, pityriasis rosea, it'll explain to you the type of rash.
By the way, I've seen that happen.
Oh.
I've seen that happen in person. I've seen in person literally bright red from that rash. And it was literally because of, and they had tons of molds and mycotoxins in that house. I have the data to prove it. And so it's very interesting.
Yeah. So doctors looked at me and they go, wow, so the antibiotics worked. I said, no, I didn't take the antibiotics. Oh, so did you come in for a steroid shot? No, I didn't. So how did it clear? Told them. Then they looked at me. Didn't believe it. Because, big pharma, they get paid a lot of money for those steroid shots and those antibiotics. So they were surprised. They were surprised that A, I self-diagnosed, and B, it cleared quicker than they expected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I can understand that.
Yeah.
So you healed in 6 weeks. Congratulations. You bounced back pretty quickly. As you know, the first time it doesn't always happen that quickly. You told me an interesting statistic that I didn't know about breast implant illness and how it typically takes about 1 month to recover for every year that it's been in your body. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so that's very daunting to a woman who chooses to have the implants removed when you're told what your recovery will look like. Every woman is different on their journey when it comes to recovering from breast implant illness, let alone just explant. Not every woman has breast implant illness, at least they don't think they do. So the physician told me that the recovery will either be very intense, depending on who you are as a person, your body, your makeup, your immune system. But the statistic is for every year that you have the implants in your body, it takes 1 month to heal, right? I had them in for 28 and a half years. So it took me 4.5 years to detox. And I will sit here today and tell you that is 1000% accurate because look, I just had another flare, right? And I'm 4 years post-explant as of yesterday. So I'm celebrating my 4-year anniversary, but I'm still, it doesn't mean you're bulletproof. It just means your immune system's stronger and stronger and stronger. So whatever it is that you are going through as a woman when you explant, that is your journey, right? I have a friend. I've been so blessed to make so many friends across the country because of the awareness that I'm bringing to breast implant illness. And I have a friend that's in Georgia. She explanted a year ago, and her detox, she's sharing with me all of the symptoms that she has. Her detox is 10 times more intense than mine was, right? So I'm walking her through it and telling her that you have to get through the worst part of it before you get to the good part. And I did tell her that. It takes 1 month for every year to detox. And that was very daunting. She was overwhelmed with that statistic because it puts it in perspective. If you've had them in for 30 years, then expect that it's going to be lengthy. If you've had them in for 2 years, expect that it might be concise. It just really depends on the person.
Excuse my naivety here, right? But it's my understanding that breast implants, they typically last about 10 years or so.
The shelf life, yes.
Right, the shelf life of that. And so when you have breast implants for 28 years, that typically means you're changing them out over that course of time, or do people not do that, or how does that work?
Well, when I got the implants, it was during a time where they didn't tell you, the surgeons didn't tell you that you needed to have them replaced, right? What they did tell you instead is, you're fine. They're saline. Our body's comprised of saline, salt water anyway. You're fine. But what they didn't tell you is the casing in which the implant is made is silicone. And we all know what goes on with silicone, right? So it's a silicone implant per se, filled with saline. All right. They didn't tell me back then, and I would guess that they probably didn't tell a lot of patients or women who had this done that you need to replace them every 10 years. They just said, you're fine. You're good. So I'm cruising around. 15 years go by. That's when I started getting sick, thinking, oh, I'm just, I'm not getting enough rest. Oh, I'm not eating enough. Oh, whatever else it could be, forgetting that there's these massive implants in my body that are foreign objects, right? That could be causing these immune responses, these triggers to food, food intolerances, to light, to fragrances, everything. And historically, you should be having them replaced every 10 to 15 years, right? So I don't even know if implants are in anymore, to be honest. I'm seeing more women have them removed. And when I say more women, at least in my circle, I've had 5 girlfriends have them removed immediately. And, that may be because they've seen what I'm going through and they have the courage to get it done. But we're seeing celebrities doing this now, right? There's a litany of women who are outspoken about it. I think one of the housewives, I can't remember which show, she actually filmed a part of the show while she was having the explant done. So the awareness is there, which I'm so grateful for. But the statistics are true, right? Yes, you should have them removed every 10 years.
Yeah. I didn't know that about you, that you went about 13 years, struggling for answer, trying to find that answer, and I can't imagine what that pain was like and what that trauma was like. But obviously glad to see you now, 4 years explanted on the other side of this.
Yeah.
And so you talked about like the recovery 4 years. I remember we talked about 2 years ago. I know you were definitely seeing some significant improvements and results. And perhaps that's encouraging for somebody who might have had implants for a long time, might be doing looking at a similar trajectory as you were, about a couple year recovery. Can you share kind of the since we haven't talked in a couple of years on this, can you share kind of how the recovery has been going since we last talked, and just to give people some hope that look, there are steps you take and you feel better along the way.
Yeah. So I've been so grateful and so blessed to have a great naturopath who has been alongside me this whole journey from day one post-explant to now. I see her maybe every 2 to 3 weeks. We do routine labs. Supplementation is very, very important because you have to have binders that bind the toxins. And there are specific binders and protocols that a woman should include in her protocol, if you will. It's not just, removing the explants is step 1, right? Removing the capsule that surrounds the explant is step 2. And the surgeon, if they are a really good surgeon, will know to do both, right? If a woman's out there listening or watching this and they say, okay, I'm ready to have my implants removed, make sure the surgeon that is going to perform the surgery is doing the explant, which is removing the implant, and the total capsulectomy, which is removing the muscle tissue that has pretty much formed that protects you, your body, your immune system from the implant. And that typically is glued to your ribs occasionally. It's a very specific procedure to remove the capsule. If you don't remove that capsule, you're doing yourself a disservice, and that is extremely unhealthy because the toxins are living in that capsule, right? So think of it this way. When a woman goes through explant and a total capsulectomy, those toxins are floating around in her body because they no longer have a host, the capsule, to attach to. So that is why it's important when you've done this procedure to be on a supervised protocol by a doctor, i.e. a functional medicine doctor or a naturopath, who can make sure that you're on a protocol on supplements that will bind those toxins and excrete from your body one of 3 ways. Our skin's the largest organ, so perspiration, through urine, or through bowel movements, right? And all 3 of those are a must during a protocol when you're going through the detox part of this. And I did that, Michael, I want to say for the first 2 years, and when I spoke with you first years ago, I was completing the first round of mold and heavy metal detox. And I've done since then another one because of this exposure, right? And I can't stress this enough. Do the protocol with binders, because you can drink all the celery juice you want. You can eat clean all you want. You can remove mold from your food as best as you can. You can clean up your environment as most as you, but if it's not coming out of your body the way it needs to in an intense way, you're doing your body a disservice. You're going to have those chronic symptoms and chronic illnesses and inflammation over and over again because it has to attach to something to excrete. So I did that. Like I said, I just finished my second round after this recent mold exposure. And I have to say, our bodies are amazing and they can heal themselves. And I've said this before and I'll say it again, if you give it the right environment, right? The first detox was brutal. I didn't know what to expect. And I was right in the middle, right at the height of my breast implant illness, literally. Now, fast forward 2 years, going through it again, I knew what to expect, which really marveled me to see how quickly my body bounced back. So making sure you have a doctor that can supervise the protocol is important. Drink a lot of water, sweat. Again, every woman's different.
No, that's great advice.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm glad you were able to bounce back so quickly the second time, especially after this recent exposure. So speaking of, right, you're a realtor, you're in houses all the time, and we know statistically speaking that houses have mold. And so how do you remain vigilant going after that? Because obviously, I think if you don't realize this currently, there's a big connection. And when I say you, Tammy, I'm not speaking to you. I'm speaking to the audience here for a second. There's a big connection between breast implant illness and mold exposure, right? And that's typically because part of the breast implant illness is the fact that there's typically mold involved, forming either inside or outside the implant, which obviously is really impacting the body. And so because of that, people typically become sensitive to mold thereafter, right? And so how do you do what you do? How do you stay vigilant? Please give us some tips and tricks.
Yeah, good question. So, given that I am so hypersensitive to mold, I could, like I said, I can walk into any environment and know immediately there's mold in here, right? Because I just have that built in. So I typically have masks with me, right? You can't completely avoid it because, as you know, it's everywhere. Right. But what I will say is this, there's a few things that I practice that are so important, regardless of what you do as a profession, just in everyday life when it comes to mold. When you have been exposed to it, or you think you've been exposed to it, when you get home, immediately undress, remove everything, put that in the wash everything, take a shower immediately. Do not touch, don't mess around with your nose and all that good stuff, because the mold spores are on us, and you can attest to this. It's in your hair, it's on your clothing. It's just around you when you've been exposed to it. So that is one thing that I make a practice of religiously when it comes to showing properties and knowing there might be mold in that property. Just do that immediately. I have, thanks to you, I have a lot of humidifiers in my home that kind of protects my environment. But when I know that I'm about to go into a listing or a property that could have a lot of mold, if it's coastal, for sure, there's going to be mold, without a doubt. It doesn't matter if there's water around, there's going to be mold. My naturopath has put me up on a mini protocol to start taking when I know that's going to happen. So, and I learned this because of what just happened. So she has this protocol for me to do if I know I've had some mold exposure, and it usually kind of zaps it within 3 days in terms of the symptoms, and we kind of catch it right away. And just to give the audience an idea of what that looks like, activated charcoal, right? With a zeolite spray, those two binders together on an empty stomach on like a 3-day run, twice a day, will zap any sort of mycotoxin or mold that might be starting to fester in your body. It gets it right away because it's so powerful, right? But you have to also know your body will go through die-off symptoms, which means you're going to feel worse if you've been exposed. So if you feel like you feel sick and more sick, that means the binders are working because it's pulling out what you need to have, to pull out of your body. So I do little protocols if I know I'm going to be exposed. I wear masks, and I typically will have a cleaning crew go in, have them kind of mask up, do what they need to do to protect themselves, and I have them clean it up real quickly, right? Clean it up before we go in, before I take a listing. But if it's a house that's not my listing, I just take those extra measures and precautionary, steps to make sure that it doesn't become a full-blown episode again.
Totally.
Yeah.
Now I want to shift gears a little bit to your profession, just
Yes.
because it is, it's one of the things that we hear about all the time is, because mold is so prevalent in all these different homes, we have this societal problem, the way we build homes, maintain them, restore them, et cetera. Unfortunately, mold is part of this ecosystem, and it is something that impacts homes across the country. And it's great to see all the things that you're doing to protect yourself. But I wanted to talk about just from a real estate perspective, right? Like mold is like the M word that you typically don't like to say in a real estate venture because, it's a deal killer. How have you been able to navigate that, being in this world of trying to educate people and really explain the severity of, being sensitive to mold, and also, of course, it's your livelihood, right? So
Yeah.
how have you navigated that?
So I'm hyper vigilant when it comes to that, especially. But let's say, for example, if it's a listing that I'm taking, and I always do a pre-listing home inspection before the listing goes live, and that allows us to have a home inspection done on the property to mitigate any issues that might present themselves during the transaction. So we get ahead of it, right? So if there are any water moisture issues, any previous water issues, or mold water intrusion, or previous what could have been old mold, mold is never really old, right? It
Right.
could have been remediated, but the ceiling still has some water damage appearance, looking like what have you. But when I take a listing, I do that first. And if there's any inkling of that being an issue, we remediate it immediately, before it even goes to market, just to get ahead of that so that there are no issues for the incoming buyer. That's number one. Number two, if I'm representing the buyer and we do the home inspection, and again, keep in mind, I'm hyper vigilant about mold, period. And again, I'm a real estate agent. I'm not a mold specialist. So we have to be very careful as agents to not say that is mold, because we're not the specialists. We have not done the testing to say that is without a doubt mold. Does it look like mold? Does it? Yes, it does. So in my business, when a home inspection is done, they too, unless they are a mold specialist, they can't say it's mold. They can say it's a biological substance, like mold-like substance, right? Further testing required, right? So when I see that, and I've seen it with my own eyes, and then I see it further, become a finding in the inspection report, I immediately order those inspections to be done so that it's taken care of prior to the buyer taking possession, or we get a credit towards those repairs before the buyer takes possession. So that is all taken care of.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I am a specialist, but even if you read my reports, it's suspect microbial growth until it's confirmed microbial growth through
microbial growth.
Data
That's
and
it.
testing, right? Yeah, but it's very interesting. So I love that you get ahead of it, right?
Yes.
You just confront it head on instead of waiting for it to be a potential deal killer. You just say, hey, look, we have a problem here. Let's confront this problem. Let's get it cleaned up and fixed up properly so we can get this house sold, right? Let's not let it be a barrier into closing this deal. And I think that's really important and really, really important to say because I think there are a lot of people out there that are reactive. And when you're reactive instead of proactive, right, and you're not prepared, then you start to get upset about something, right? So for example, I've talked to real estate agents who have been like, hey, I really am upset about mold because mold kills a lot of deals for me. And it's like, well, I love what you said. The answer to that is, well, if you're proactive about it and you're looking for it and you're actually helping people overcome that challenge by being transparent about that, guess what? It's not a deal killer anymore because you can resolve it before it even goes to market, which I think is such a brilliant strategy of yours. And you're helping, the buyer, even though you don't represent the buyer, you're helping the buyer because you're not perpetuating this same issue over and over again, which we all suffer from at some point or another, right? And so I think that's really brilliant. Thank you for pointing that out, and thank you for that strategy. It's a great one.
It's so important because it's just part of real estate, period. It doesn't matter where the home is. It doesn't necessarily have to be coastal, even though coastal, it pretty much has a higher higher rate of having it. It could be in the mountains, right? I mean, mold lives everywhere, Michael. We know that. It's in the drywall. It's on the floor. Our pets bring it in. It's in the food we consume. It's in our washer. I mean, it's in our washer. I mean, it's in our, what I learned from you the last time we spoke is to make sure you check the dishwasher gasket.
Yeah.
Like, it's everywhere. Everywhere. The minute you open up that washer when you're touring a property and it smells musty, hello, right? That tells me something. We got to get that looked at. That's immediate. Anytime I open up that dishwasher and it smells musty, hello, that's an issue, right? Get ahead of it. Mitigate it so that it doesn't become a deal killer halfway through escrow. Get ahead of it.
No, I love that approach. Thank you so much for that. That was brilliant. And I think anybody out there who's listening, if you're a real estate agent and you're worried about mold because it's a deal killer, guess what? You've got a strategy. Get ahead of it. If you get ahead of it, everybody wins, nobody loses. And then you don't have to worry about the deal falling apart at escrow or at the inspection, et cetera, et cetera. Brilliant.
And I will say this, though, because in real estate, there are, seller disclosures, right? So when we open escrow, the seller provides the buyer with a seller property questionnaire and a transfer disclosure statement that essentially is the seller testifying to their knowledge, the condition of the property, any, water intrusion, any mold issues, any repairs, upgrades, remodels, a death on the, property, whatever material facts that they are aware of, that is disclosed. So that disclosure comes to the buyer in the beginning of the transaction. I comb that over with a fine-tooth comb. The first thing I look for is anything water related or mold related. That's the first thing I look for. And what I then look for is there an explanation as to why they said, yes, there was water intrusion or mold issues on the property? I look for that information as to, was it remediated? If so, where are the receipts? Where's the scope of work? We want to see all these disclosures so that we can confirm it was done. But I don't stop there, right? When we do our home inspection, I then say, hey, FYI, Mr. Home Inspector, it was disclosed by the seller that in this wall over here in the kitchen or under the sink, there was a previous water issue. Can you please take a look at these to make sure it's been remediated? If it's an old water issue or if there's any mold or anything going on, just to kind of, extra precautionary steps. So there's just a lot we can do as agents to make sure that if that pops up to be an issue, be hypervigilant about it. Become due diligent times 10 to make sure.
No, that's really good advice. Obviously, that's all that research and all that homework. It's investing time into making sure that you've got all the facts straight so you can make sure that the deal goes through. Because if you don't have the facts straight and you get surprised, it's really hard to handle things, right? And so I think that's really, really important. Now, as a real estate agent, do you also do rentals?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are some of the trouble spots we see in the rental community? Because, obviously in a rental situation, when you're renting a place for a year and, that place has mold, you end up getting sick there, it becomes really, really difficult for everybody. And I don't want to, paint landlords as bad people because some of them are amazing people, but of course, just like anything out in the world, you're going to have some bad apples here and there. And so, I think it's any cautionary tales you can help us with regards to the rental scene.
Yes. So, the tenant laws in our country are very strong, right? They're very protective of the tenants. They have a lot of rights. And what I have seen lately, especially with a lot of friends who are renting, who are so sick all the time, who have confirmed, lo and behold, it's mold exposure, and it's from the house, right? A house that was built in 1910. I mean, they've got leaky ceilings, the roof's been leaking, everything. I mean, all of the obvious signs that point towards, okay, there could be a mold issue. I always, I take it seriously, but I also proceed with caution because with tenants and landlords, whether it's a property management company or the homeowner that's renting it out, or you're living at, a community development where it's managed by a large conglomerate, right? Either way, mold is a very serious issue, right? I lived in a building once, downtown San Diego, and it was 27 stories. The building was brand new. I lived on the 10th floor, and within 3 months into living there, brand new building, the top floor, which is where the pool and the spa and everything is, flooded, right? So all this water comes down from the 27th floor, stopped at the 11th floor. on my side of the building, stop there. All of those units were damaged, right? So they all had to move them elsewhere, pay for them to do, but their mold, there was a water remediation, and the issues that ensued after that took about 6 to 9 months to remediate,
Wow.
right? So these tenants, right, have all the right, they did what they needed to do. They did all the right things. But once they moved back in, it happened again. Right. So at this point, now you've got hallways smelling like musty and odor and this and that. And for me, being, extremely sensitive to that on so many levels, I look at that and say, okay, how do we know for sure that that's being done the right way? So as a tenant, I would encourage that you remain hypervigilant with the property management company, with the landlord, whomever it might be, that it's done the right way. And as a tenant, we have rights, right? If you don't feel comfortable about it, I typically will say, do I need to get an environmental engineer out here? You have a right.
Yeah.
Do I need to get someone out here to confirm that the water moisture issues have been remediated and that there isn't any mold? Because I feel sick all the time. I am sick all the time. And I've got rashes on my body. I've got sinus issues all the time. I've got a headache all the time. I have all the symptoms of mold exposure. And you're telling me it was remediated? Well, I'm going to do my due diligence, right? Tenants, you need to remember you have rights. You have rights. Do an inspection, provide it to the landlord, and they have to take care of it.
Yeah, I think one of the things that people often don't realize is that they can do their own due diligence. Now, I know the cost becomes tricky, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I know a lot of tenants, they'll have a hard time getting over the concept of paying for an inspection to inspect the place that they're renting because they don't own that place.
Right.
And I always have to help get people over that hump. Well, if you are the one that hires the inspector, then you're going to vet them. You're going to make sure that they're actually someone you trust that's going to do a good job to find the issues. Because a landlord, typically they're going to have a different viewpoint, right? Hey, I want to provide a clean bill of health for the tenant, but I want to find someone as cheap as possible. There's costs of owning a building or owning a place, a house, etc. So, of course, their whole mentality is I need to be cost effective because I've got other bills to pay, right? Mm-hmm. And on the flip side, you're not necessarily trying to be cost effective as a renter. You're trying to actually find whatever problems and do your due diligence properly because you're concerned about your health, right? So it's two different opposite sides of the spectrum to be in. So as a renter, you actually want to be the person that does the due diligence and invests in that inspection. Now, of course, like different states have different laws, right? Who's responsible for the fee of that test? Like that's something that you can work out with the landlord amicably later. But in the meantime, take action, right? Get the results you need to show the landlord, hey, look, I'm not just crazy. I've been feeling not well, and I think I figured out why. What can we do to take care of this so I can continue to rent this place and continue to make sure this place is habitable and safe, right? And so, I'm not sure if you've given similar advice or not, but yes. That's usually what I'm recommending.
10,000%. You have the right. And, I can tell you without a doubt, if I were a landlord and that was presented to me as a possible issue, I would do everything to make sure that I took care of it, because what could ensue after that would allow the landlord to be liable for anything is by far greater than handling it. Totally. Just handle it, right? Take care of it. You don't want anything down the line to come back and say, well, you could have repaired it or you did repair it, but you cut corners and now this is what's happening. It's just, as a landlord, have enough, sight to know that I'm preventing something from down the line from happening. So just take care of it now, right? But again, keep in mind, as a renter, we have rights. We have rights. As a consumer, we have rights. We can do our due diligence, and if these reports come back that there's mold or the water issues are greater than they thought they were, present that to the landlord. Work something out in terms of, hey, maybe it'll come off my rent for the next month. Maybe it'll come off of my deposit, what have you. There's ways to negotiate all of that so everybody's happy, just so that everybody's healthy and safe.
Yeah, a little message and wise advice for landlords. If you are a landlord, there are two things you should probably know. One, the technology today is evolved, right? You could actually show the types of molds in homes. Mm-hmm. You could test the body. You could do blood tests for mycotoxins. You could test the toxins in the bodies. You could show correlation, right? You can't prove causation, but you could show correlation. And in a court of law, that's not going to look pretty good on a jury, right? Just to be factual about that. And also, you have, if they can prove that there's a likelihood that someone got sick in your place by connecting those dots, and you didn't take action, right? You're gonna be looking at some liability there, and obviously you have insurance, and depending on what your insurance policy is, maybe they'll cover the legal costs, maybe they won't. But it's important that if you're gonna be a landlord and you're gonna rent places, right? You know that you have some responsibilities with renting a place out for tenants, and it's definitely cheaper in the long run to fix the place than to deal with any sort of litigation or any sort of issues that might come out of litigation. These cases can be, six-figure cases, right? So at a minimum. The second thing I would say is, if you have mold in your place as a landlord, that's literally devaluing your property, right? And so you want to protect your investment. You've invested in a place with a specific reason of being able to obviously build equity in that place. You're going to rent it out, right? This becomes a set of income for you. Well, if you're degrading the value of your house because water is intruding into the space, or something, ventilation isn't correct, or insulation's not done right, whatever the cause may be, that's allowing moisture and mold to grow, you are hurting the value of your place. And that problem, the longer you take to repair it, is going to get worse and worse and more costly to fix. So it's important, I think. I don't know if you'd like to add your 2 cents there, please, but
yes, on all fronts. And let's take it a little further. So, for the most part, when you're talking about tenants, right, and renters, the average age, I would say, is between 19 and up, right? There's a bulk of them that are renting for a variety of reasons, whether you just sold your home and you're renting temporarily, or if you've just gotten a divorce and you need to rent, whatever the reason is for you to be a renter. They're typically healthy people. They're young, they're vibrant, they're able to, bounce back relatively quickly, what have you. But you throw into this equation someone who's a lot older, right? Let's talk about nursing homes, right? Someone who's older, who's living in an environment where we know there's water, moisture, and there's evidence of some, mold or previously, and their immune systems aren't as strong, right? So if that person is living in a home that is being managed by someone else, I think that the duty of care and the standard of care that falls upon that landlord or the property manager or whomever's managing that facility, if it's a nursing home or what have you, you have to really be proactive, because that is a sensitive person whose immune system doesn't bounce back as quickly, right? And nursing homes, I feel, we've never even talked about this, is an ideal situation for such a case, right? You've got a plethora of elderly people living in one condensed space, and who knows what the walls look like, who knows what the rooms look like, because I'll be honest, my mom lives in a nursing home, and every time I go to visit her, the room smells musty, right? So what do you do at that point? Who do you talk to at that point? Because it's not just one room, it's the whole, probably the ventilation system, right? So as a tenant, as a renter, whether you're 18 years old, 36 years old, or God forbid, someone who's 65 or 70 or 75 years old in that situation, landlords, please take care of it, because you're right, Michael. It's much more costly on the other side of it to just say, oh yeah, well, we'll do this, but we really don't want to do it because we got to save on costs. It'll cost you in the long run.
No, I've been a part of some of these cases. I've seen it firsthand. I've seen some of these big payouts, that unfortunately get paid when you're liable for something, right? These things happen. And so it's important to, to address them head on. So before we go here today, we covered, first off, thank you so much for the update on how you're doing. I'm so glad to see you doing better and better.
Much.
And really thank you for entertaining me and going into the rabbit hole of real estate for a minute. The podcast is called Never Been Sicker, right?
Yes.
And so that's because as I sit here today and tell you this, it's unfortunate, but we have never been sicker than we are today. Unfortunately, that statistic was true 5 years ago. It's true today. We're trending in the wrong direction. Hopefully this turns around soon. But, outside of all the awareness you're bringing towards breast implant illness, which I so appreciate, And I think it's very necessary. What are some other reasons that you believe we have never been sicker than we are today? What are some things we need to look out for, and how can we turn things around?
I really feel like the key word that comes to my mind is being proactive, right? I think for so long we have resided in this space where if it doesn't seem like it's broken, then don't try to fix it, right? So we've kind of just swept things under the carpet for so long, and we have relied on, as a society, on big pharma for too long. I mean, for too long, right? And if you're not feeling well, okay, here's a pill, right? If you're not, if you feel like something's coming on, or you just got over something, but you're still not feeling really good, okay, let's do this. And I'm going to go back to the elderly because I feel like I've witnessed this recently. I'm an advocate for myself. And as human beings on this earth, we need to be the advocate. We need to speak up. It's one thing to have health insurance, but it's also another to have health insurance, but to be your own advocate, because they're not going to fight for you. And I did that recently when it came to this recent exposure and fighting for myself with the doctors by saying, hey, this is what it is. I need to fight with it. I'm not going to take the meds that you're telling me to take. It would make it worse. What would happen, Michael, if an elderly person, I feel bad for all of these senior citizens that are going to the doctor that are just in that rabbit hole, right? Of seeing the doctor, they prescribe a medication, come back 6 weeks later, they feel worse. So they give them something else, right? So it's just continuous vicious cycle of just medicating and not looking at the root cause. We are designed, how God created us to be, was to be in alignment with perfect health, right? Any disease, anything outside of that, there's a reason for it. And I think as a society, we are inherently healthy, but it's what we're putting into our bodies. It's what we're exposed to, which granted, we can't stop being exposed to all of the toxins in the world. We can't live in a bubble. But I think what we need to do is, because of how rapid this has become with sickness, and we are sicker than we've never been. I mean, who's the healthiest right now? It's an investment, right? You have to be proactive. You have to fight for yourself. You have to be an advocate because you do have a say. It is your body at the end of the day. But I think as a society, we need to, and I'm hoping that will change with what's going on with our new administration, that, something will change with regards to the health, the food that we eat, the supplements, the dyes, everything that goes into what we eat, because none of that's healthy for us. None of it. Tell me one person who thinks having any of those dyes and artificial flavoring and anything else in food that's processed is okay for you. It's not, right? So I think what happens is you have a society that we should be healthy, but we become rid with dis-ease, right? Disease, dis-ease. And we seek medicine to fix it without realizing, well, what are we treating? Like, let's get to the root cause. Why are we giving you this medication? Why am I prescribing this antibiotic? Well, antibiotics are for infections. So why are you giving it to me when I don't have an infection? And I think doctors, and I've said this to my own doctors and doctors who are going to listen to this, I think for the most part, they're practicing medicine. And with all due respect, they haven't figured it out yet. They're practicing. Right? Not to say that every doctor is not doing a good thing for the community or for people. There are a lot of really good doctors out there that are willing to listen to the patient, that are willing to hear their symptoms and try to get to the root cause of their symptoms by ordering labs, by going and doing these testing to figure out what it is, versus just so quick to pull the trigger on medication. And that's what I mean by you're just practicing. You're still trying to figure it out, right? That might rub people the wrong way, so be it, but it's the truth, right? Some of us who don't have a voice are caught in that vicious cycle of somebody practicing medicine on them and not really healing.
No, it's a very valid point. Obviously we see a lot of shift and a lot of movement towards root cause medicine, which is really great to see, but we're not there yet, societally, we're not there yet. And, other societies out there in the world, they've been practicing in that direction for a long time, right? We're just kind of waking up to it.
I will say this, Michael, every time I go to Europe, right, and I have foods that I would not normally eat here in our country, I don't have a response to it. Yeah. Dairy, anything I eat over there, gluten, I don't have any responses to it. Here in our country, you better bet if I eat any gluten, my body responds to it. It's the way that we're manufacturing what we eat in this country. That's the defining difference, which is why we are sick and we've never been sicker.
Even the soil, other parts of the world, they're farming. They actually change where they plant crops. They rotate them because the different plants add things to the soil and different plants subtract things from the soil. And so by moving the actual fields around of what you're planting in each field, you're going to actually help the soil composition. And we don't do that here, interestingly enough. But
it costs too much.
Apparently so. But
apparently so.
We're learning lessons as we go, right? We're practicing, as you said.
We are practicing. That's
practicing.
The key word.
Well, Tammy, thank you so much for being here again. Really appreciate it. Really great to hear, a very uplifting update. And thank you for covering all the things that you covered here today. I'm sure I will see you soon. Don't take another 2 years to reach back out.
I know. Life just goes by. Look, we're already halfway through the year. It's going to be Christmas before we know it. But I'm grateful to anytime I can help educate and bring awareness to all of the life experiences that I have regarding my health and my journey. And it's just, again, and I will always default to this, our bodies are so powerful and we can heal ourselves if we give it the right environment, period.
Yeah. Well said. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Oh my goodness. On Instagram, at Tammy Dean, realtor. Same with the website. I'm very vocal about breast implant illness. I'm vocal about mold exposure. I'm vocal about being vigilant in your health and just, being an advocate for yourself. So I just feel like that if we can come together and serve one another and help educate one another, we'll get one more step closer to finding some sort of balance where there's an imbalance.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Tammy, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate it.